Bob. Why don't you stand here?
I think the microphone should be working. I think Eric fixed it.
Is the microphone working?
Oh, yeah.
No, it is. I'll come back and listen. I sound better this way. Excuse me. My name is Walt Pickett, and I'll just take a couple of minutes. I appreciate the opportunity. As a writer, imagine what happens. One day I was at a Rotary luncheon, and a very dignified-looking lady, a little older than me, sat down beside me, and she said, "The Soviets tried to assassinate me 7 times. It didn't work. You want to write the book?" Guess what I said?
Yeah.
Well, this is the book. Actually, her father was Larry Haas. And Larry Haas, I'll give you a few teasers, that way maybe you'll be interested in buying a book. Larry Haas was a fellow who lied his way into Bell Aviation. One lie, the biggest lie in his life, got him into Bell, and he wound up within a short time at the top of the P-59 jet project, the top secret project. Now you can imagine what kind of a lie that took, but it was a simple one. However, the Soviets wanted to pick his brain. They sent Andrei Shevchenko from Amtorg, who was the inspector inspecting P-39s and 63s here. They sent him to seduce Larry Haas to get the P-59 secrets. The FBI got in the picture and said, "Larry, get yourself seduced." And what he did is he made the Soviets believe that he was going to help them get the secrets of jet aviation. In the end, he turned, of course. And you mentioned Washington, John Washington bucked that project too. The interesting thing for me about this book was that I couldn't have written it without the archives, the Bell archives here. One of the most remarkable experiences I've had is reading the archives here, better than what I could find in the Library of Congress. And the opportunity to work on that brought us to the point where we discovered that this story has almost never been told. A few sentences in a few books, maybe a paragraph, that's it. The rest of this has been kept hidden in J. Edgar Hoover's archives for 75 years. He considered it one of his greatest failures. However, justice was done. So on his deathbed, Larry Haas said to his daughter Kay, my co-author, "It's time to tell the world my story." So this is the first time the story's ever been told, and Bell is at the center of that story. It's an opportunity to learn something about history, a history lesson that's never been told before.
Well, would you tell the story? Now, I'm interjecting here and extending this, but tell them what your co-author did to a man that sat down next to him.
Yes, my co-author just barely breaks 5 feet tall, and she's a very slim lady, and you would not expect this. One of the assassination attempts was in a movie theater in Olean, New York, and she and her sister were in the theater watching a movie, and a man came into the theater and walked down the aisle and sat right next to them. He slowly inched his arm over. She was expecting something, but her father had taught her a few tricks. Within about 1 second, she had launched him forward into the seat in front of him, smashed his nose like a raw egg, and his knife went clattering down the floor, and that was the end of that assassination attempt. And she was quite a remarkable lady, but the more stories she told me, the fewer I believed until I got into the 400 pages of declassified FBI documents that we got. And she said, "You don't believe that? Sit down next to me." I was in her kitchen. I sat down next to her at a kitchen table. And she said, "Just lean toward me for a second." I did, and the next thing I knew, I was looking up at her from the floor. Well, there were 7 assassination attempts, and she managed to outsmart them all. Jack Barsky, who some of you may know because he was a Soviet spy who flipped a few years ago, has written a couple of very interesting books. He said she made it look like the Soviets were the gang who couldn't shoot straight. And she lived in hiding for many years after that. As a matter of fact, I was under surveillance myself for about 4 years during the writing of this book by the FBI, because it was considered a dangerous project. Also, thank you to Dr. Grinberg here, by the way, who helped me quite a bit with the history of the Soviet Air Force rising like a phoenix out of the rubble of Operation Barbarossa when Hitler invaded the Soviet Union. Larry Haas worked very closely here at Bell with the Soviet fighter pilots. And he came to respect them tremendously. He said they were some of the finest pilots in the world. The P-39 had some quirks that many other air forces, including our own, weren't too happy with. But the Soviet pilots said this is the best thing in the air. They were knocking the Germans out of the sky like flies. So the opportunity to get to know people here at Bell was a true inspiration for me. I really appreciated it. I only have one more thing I'd like to add. John, I want to thank you for being here, particularly because you're from Queens, I'm from New Jersey, I worked in Manhattan for years. You and I are the only people here speaking English properly.
I would like to make a comment, may I? There's a lot of stories in this new book of mine and other authors. The biggest and most important story, would you stand up, Ilya? Ilya, please? Just get over here. Do what you're told. Biggest story, there's books, Larry, the book Cobra, other writings, have almost no one has written something about the record of the Bell airplanes in Russia. 7,000 of them. They performed magnificently. And he's the author of Red Phoenix Rising, and it's through him that that we now understand how valuable it was, and B, he really whacked me to go to England to buy the airplane. And he didn't give me any money.
That's an art of it. That's an art of it.
Yes. So, the front part of this book is dedicated, and there's an appendix to go with it, with the contribution of the P-39 in total. Now my kids, and I'll finish with this, my kids, they come in the house and they start kidding me. So they asked Wikipedia, the Alexia, tell me about the P-39 Air Cobra. Bingo, she comes back and said, it is now being recognized that the Bell P-39 has more victories than any other American airplane.
Excuse me, can we get you to use the mic? We can't hear you back here.
I'm sure it's working. Sorry, anyway, the last thing I said was my children asked Alexia, at home about the P-39. And it comes back with, it is now generally accepted that the P-39 has more victories than any other World War II American airplane. And the bulk of those victories were in Russia. By the time June 6th comes, there was barely any Russian or German Luftwaffe opposition. And we had 2 P-47 drivers. When I asked them the question, did you have any air opposition? Very, very little, because the Russians had to had the Luftwaffe beat with the P-39. Well, thank you, everybody.